Hey, what's up, everybody? True Boxing here. Thank you for coming back to Get Hit with the Truth. Today we're doing the What's Next on the newly unified and undefeated WBO and IBF middleweight champion of the world, Janibek Alimkhanuly. I'll get it down. Following his dominating 6th round TKO victory over previously undefeated Vicente Gualtieri on as they fought on Saturday, October 14th on ESPN. Now, before we get into that, if you could smash the like button, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. I really do appreciate any and all support that I can get as I continue to build my channel here. You know, I'm on my way to 600 subscribers. I want to get there before the end of the year. I think we can do more than that. We still got a little over 2 months, so help me out. Hopefully we can get there. I got about 579, 580 right now rolling. So we'll see how that goes. But back to, you know, Janibek, and I'm just going to call him Janibek from now on. It's easier. His last name, I took that last name at exactly the way it was spelled. Usually I'm not too far off with some of these pronunciations of people's names, but that one I was off, obviously, and it's kind of complicated based on how it looks too. So you know, whatever, it is what it is. But I like Janibek. It was a good, solid breakdown of Gualtieri, who we really didn't know. You know, Gualtieri had defeated Esquiva Falchao by a decision, put him down in that fight earlier in the year, and became the IBF middleweight champion, capturing the vacant belt. So Janibek, you know, got his crack at Gualtieri to unify belts and shut down half of the division in terms of championships. And this was a big deal right here. It really was, you know. Unifying titles is not a small feat, you know, it really isn't. And Janibek kind of quietly did it in an explosive way. He just broke down Gualtieri. Gualtieri was trying to box. He was trying to use elusiveness and counterpunch and stuff, but he just could not take the power of Janibek, and Janibek just kept coming and kept coming and kept coming, broke him down, stopped him in the 6th round, and is now the unified middleweight champion of the world. So now the big question is, what's next for Janibek following that victory? And it's tough to say because nobody really seems to be, you know, rushing to the front of the line to fight him. In terms of mandatories, the IBF mandatory is not due because there is no #1 contender. I'm not even sure the WBO has laid out a mandatory fight. I don't think they have, to determine a new #1 contender. Remember, Falchao and Gualtieri fought for the vacant belt back in July, and they were the top 2 contenders at the time for that. Now, with Janibek in the WBO, the #1 contender is Chris Eubank Jr. and we're not sure if he wants to fight him, but one fight that I think I started looking through the rankings, and the IBF has him at #4, the WBO has him at #2, and that's Mayram Nursultanov, I think is the guy's name, and he's also from Kazakhstan, and he's undefeated. He's 19-0, 11 knockouts. So this will be an all Kazakh fight right here between these two, and this guy is looking sharp. He hasn't beaten anybody super, you know, like in terms of name recognition, hasn't beaten anybody outside of former world title challenger Marcelo Coceres by a 10-round decision. But outside of that, I mean, he hasn't really done much, but he's highly ranked. And if a fight gets passed on by Chris Eubank, then you could very well see this fight right here. The WBO could make a mandatory fight happen. And I can't remember the last time Janibek actually had a mandatory WBO fight. Stephen Butler wasn't a mandatory. Gualtieri was a unification bout. His previous fight before that was against Denzel Bentley in November of last year, and that wasn't a mandatory as far as I remember. The last mandatory was actually Janibek, and he was upgraded to full champ, so his WBO mandatory might be long overdue. I know there's been some confusion because Jaime Munguia last year was supposed to fight. They had ordered him to fight Janibek, and he backed out of the fight. He didn't want that. So, gonna be interesting to see if a mandatory is put in play. But let's run through the rest of the top 10, at least the top 10 at the mid-year point. Because I go off of my last top 10s and before I reevaluate. And let's take a look at what Janibek could get next. Let's start with the guy who technically is still number one. He's probably dropping out of that spot at the end of the year, and that's former Unified Middleweight Champion, two-time Unified Middleweight Champion, Triple G Gennady Golovkin. Even though it's an all-Kazakh fight, Triple G was the WBO's number one contender halfway through the year, but they've, he's dropped out of that position. That tells me he's probably not returning to middleweight, and I truly believe we're going to see Triple G fighting at super middleweight if he does fight at all in the future. But yeah, just Janibek and Triple G is just, even though it's an all Kazakh fight and a lot of people would be interested, it's just not going to happen. Number two, our next is Carlos Adames, the WBC interim champion. Not likely to happen next. Adames is still waiting around to see what the WBC is going to decide for Jermall Charlo, the undefeated but very inactive champion for the WBC. And we know Charlo's finally coming back in November when he takes on Jose Benavidez Jr., but I don't even think that's going to be for the WBC title. So Adames is waiting around to see what happens there, but he's also a PBC guy, where Janibek is with Top Rank, and I just don't see the two sides coming together until this fight is just so juicy that they have to have it. So I'm not seeing it next for Janibek. Then there's Liam Smith, the former junior middleweight champion. I absolutely could see Liam Smith taking this fight. He had the two fights with Chris Eubank this year. He won the first one, lost the second one. But if Eubank doesn't want to fight, Liam Smith is a solid-ass name, and would be a legitimate contender. And I think Liam Smith would take the fight to try to win the unified title. You remember, Liam Smith is a guy, he wanted to fight Janibek earlier in the year. He was ordered to fight Janibek after the win over Eubank, but Eubank exercised the rematch clause in their contract, and Liam Smith had to honor that. So even though Liam Smith lost the rematch with Chris Eubank, Janibek is one of those guys that is desperate to get names on his resume. He wants to fight the top tier guys. I think he would fight Liam Smith, to be honest. I think he would. Then there's WBA champion Erislandy Lara. Not gonna happen. Lara is going to be fighting next against Danny Garcia, likely in December, when they meet at a catchweight at 155. He'll defend his middleweight title in that fight. And then if he's victorious, Lara's gonna have to fight Michael Zarafa in a mandatory defense. And he's also a PBC guy, where Janibek is a top rank guy. So just a lot of reasons why that fight is not possible next. Then there's Chris Eubank Jr., who is the number one contender to Janibek right now. Eubank could have the fight in 2 seconds if he wanted it, but Eubank just wants to fight local fights like Liam Smith, which is not a bad thing. Liam Smith's a legit contender. Or he wants to fight major fights. And if he fights in between those, it's going to be against somebody that he's absolutely going to smash on that you don't even know. Because that's just what Eubank does. He's not the type of guy that wants to fight the top tier guys if they don't bring in money. And he doesn't seem concerned in winning a world title finally. It doesn't seem to be a major goal for him, even though he could get the fight easily, especially with him being the number one contender. So if he wanted to fight with Janibek, he could have it, but I don't think he wants to take that risk, because Janibek's not a huge name, and I don't think he's going to fight him. A rematch with Vicente Gualtieri, the now former IBF champion. No need for a rematch. Not going to happen. Former champion Esquiva Falcao. Now, he does have ties with Top Rank, as Janibek does, but I don't think Top Rank is going to try to put Falcao in there after Janibek destroyed Gualtieri, who beat Falcao. Possible though, because they both are technically with Top Rank, so it is technically possible. Felix Cash, his highest rating is in the WBO. I think he's like 4th, something like that, along those lines. You know, he's undefeated, on the rise. I think it's possible that they could throw him in there with Janibek if he wanted to fight, but I think he might want to beat one more decent fighter and establish his name before he takes on Janibek. And then there's Liam Williams, the former, you know, the former world title challenger. Liam Williams, I think, is always down to fight. And if worst case scenario, Janibek wanted to, wanted to just stay active and fight a guy with a decent name, Liam Williams would probably take the fight. But in my opinion, there's other guys that might do that too. So for me, I think Liam Smith absolutely could be a front runner here, because Chris Eubank could get the fight if he wanted. I don't think he wants the fight. I don't think he wants anything to do with Janibek. So I think he's going to stay away from that for sure. But outside of that, unification doesn't look likely with Lara and Charlo. Not going to happen there. But I really believe Liam Smith is a possibility. And then if he's not a possibility, if he doesn't end up fighting, Janibek, then there's the potential for maybe Falcao, Felix Cash, Liam Williams sitting at the back, or he could get a new mandatory and Myram Nursultanov, his countryman from Kazakhstan, who's undefeated. So we'll see. Very interested in seeing what Janibek does. This technically was probably his best victory right here because he unified belts. So interested in seeing what he gets from it following that victory. So that's it. That's what I got. That's my what's next on Janibek Alimkhanuly following his dominating 6-round TKO victory over Vicente Gualtieri to unify the WBO and IBF Middleweight Championship of the world on October 14th on ESPN. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, smash the like button, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. I appreciate any and all support. This is True Boxing. You've been hit with the truth.